Welcome to About Writing, and I'm your host, Ben Cheever, and today we have Peter Selgin with a novel, I think an excellent novel. Why don't I just say an excellent novel,
Okay. Good.
titled Life Goes to the Movies. And it took a long time for you to write this novel.
Yeah, it got written and written and written again over a course of, part of the experience is autobiographical. So it was lived about 30 years ago.
Let's just stop for a second. Isn't part of the experience of most novels autobiographical?
I should have said more than part. I'd say a great deal. In fact, parts of the novel were published as nonfiction, because they really are. But then I wrote it over and over again, starting about 20 years ago. The first draft goes back 20 years. Yeah.
And
it's a long time.
It is a long time.
It's embarrassing.
No, I don't think there's because it doesn't matter to the reader how long it took to write something.
Unless you can tell that they sweat over it.
Well, that's right. Oh, what's the line from Yeats? A line will take us hours maybe, yet if it doesn't seem a moment's thought, our stitching and unstitching are for naught. Pretty good. So it doesn't need, you don't want it to look labored, but it doesn't look labored. It's fluid and lively, but I was very interested actually because I'm just now starting another novel, and I was where conviction came to you. In other words, you started on this project, and then at some point you were looking for the word of when an airplane takes off.
Critical mass, or
reach critical mass.
Yes, something like that. With this book, and I've had different, great books have been written in 3 weeks, and I'm not thinking of Kerouac at the moment.
I think they reworked that a lot.
That was reworked a lot, and you had Malcolm Cowley in there editing, and the 3 week was really a revision. It wasn't. But Hans Fallada wrote a novel called The Drunkard in 3 weeks. Not only did he write it in 3 weeks, he wrote it on a single sheet of paper in handwriting so small they thought it was code at first. And he wrote it while he was in prison for beating his wife. And the style is impeccable.
But those people all should be killed, I think. I mean, supposedly Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde came to Stevenson, right? In a dream. He just got up and transcribed it. And so I think that does happen. But the vast majority of experience is that not that.
I think there are two things that happen typically. Either that you have that first pure impulse and somehow you are zoned into the writing from the very beginning, and like Mozart, it's almost like dictation, and it comes to you. If you're going to have to work on something, then you're in for the long haul. You're going to really, really work it to get it to where it seems effortless. In this case, this was, 15 years, while writing short stories and other novels, 15 years to get it to seem as if it were completely effortless or natural or easy.
And then the trouble is that you have so much of it in your mind. How do you know? I find it difficult knowing, when I look at a paragraph, one thing is you get bored with things that might really be quite good. So I find it useful to read other people's books a couple of times, so 3 times actually. So I get to the point where I can see that something's still good, even if it's not novel.
I had a different experience that was more that one by one sections and paragraphs would seem to almost sort of settle or solidify.
Gel.
They would gel, and to where I wouldn't want to change a word, but it was always sort of working out those sections, and sometimes they were long sections that hadn't reached that point. So that in the rewriting, I would always retype or re-keyboard, as we say now, the whole manuscript. The whole manuscript. I'm a real believer that you just enter the rhythm of the writing through the hands, and you re-keyboard every word. But
so you can't just cut and paste.
You're not cutting, you're not pasting, you're living, you're in the material. But there would be whole sections where I would change, a punctuation or a word, but nothing else. And then I'd come to a section that would completely rework entirely. So it was a little bit of both. But there was a gradual feeling that parts were solidifying.
When I did my father's letters, which was the first writing I'd written for newspapers and magazines, but I really felt that I was under the Klieg lights. The sections between the letters, I would work at them until I was convinced that I'd plagiarized them. And then I could go ahead.
Yeah, there's that whole idea of the mortar and the bricks where, you know, you're lucky as a writer you have bricks, you know, sections that are just there. And it's trying to make the mortar such that it is as strong as the brick. And that's where all the work comes in. That's where we labor.
Before we go any further, I want you to read a little bit of it, because it's full of pleasure and joys and style. And if you want to set the section up a little bit,
sure.
Do.
There is a section here that I will read. The novel is about two young men. One is a little bit older than the other. His name is Duane. And Duane becomes, for Nigel, the narrator, a sort of role model into the experience of being a true American.
And an artist.
And an artist. Nigel is a son of immigrants. And he doesn't feel entirely assimilated.
Despite his name.
Well, his name is a fabrication, anyway, of his father. But so he gloms on to Duane, whom he looks up to as a sort of source of integration, someone who can teach him how to be a real American. And of course the basic plot is that his chosen role model is arguably insane and leads him deeper and deeper into madness via the movies. In the scene that I'm going to read,
and yet that gives it a negative cast that I don't really think it has. It is a kind of joy. It's a joyous exploration.
It's meant to be a celebration of this, and it was partly written as a celebration of a friendship that I had and still have, notwithstanding this novel, which nearly broke it. But that's another story. In this scene, Duane, who is eccentric, and finally, after disappearing nightly, mysteriously, going. Nigel doesn't know where. Finally, on New Year's Eve, he takes Nigel with him and shows him a little secret part of his life, and they end up in a cubbyhole underneath Times Square,
where they can look up at the
pulsing lights of Times Square. So this is Duane.
He hates Christmas, but he likes New Year's.
He likes New Year's and he hates Christmas. So here they are in the tunnel, and they're speaking, and Nigel says to him, you know, what do you do down here? What do I do? Yeah, what do you do? Nothing. I don't do anything, babe. That's the whole point. You're not supposed to do anything in a sanctuary, and that's just what this place is, a sanctuary. I come here to get away from all the crazies up there. He pointed up, to be safe with the alligators and the sewer rats. Listen. He cupped a hand over his ear. Hear that? That's the the gut rumble of the New World Order. I listened. I didn't hear anything. Listen. He made the sound for me, and then I heard it. A steady hum, like the sound a refrigerator makes when it's on. They say there's a Moog synthesizer down here somewhere, right here in the belly of civilization. They say that it gives off a special frequency designed to calm human nerves. They say it's been humming that note since 1971, since the day I signed a piece of paper solemnly swearing to defend my country against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Right up there, he pointed, in the armed Forces recruiting station in Times Square. That's where I signed on the dotted line. Why? Why what? Why did you enlist? He shook his head. I don't know. Because my father dared me to. Because I was sick of him calling me pussy. Because I wanted to be John Wayne in the Green Berets. Or maybe it was the that drew me there, like a snake charmer's flute. It still draws me to this day. Listen. We both listened. They say that is all that's holding the city together. Supposedly, if it should ever stop for any reason, the forces binding civilization together will dissolve and the citizens of Gotham will go wild, rampaging, screaming bloody naked in the streets, tearing each other's throats out like werewolves. Someday, babe, or no it's gonna happen. The other shoe is gonna drop, and when it does, man, right here, that's where you'll find me. Here? I asked. That's right, babe, here. In this hole under the city? You call it a hole now, but when the time comes, it will be the closest thing on earth to paradise, relatively speaking.
Anyway. I think it's
Because you sit there, I know. I tell myself that it's but every time I read it, I read
Because there's a
the
right. You're supposed to when you meditate. Right. Yeah. That's wonderful. You get a real clear picture of this guy. One of the joys of the book is that you as the reader, I as the reader, you fall in love with this guy,
with Dwayne.
Yeah, I mean, you don't. I don't feel quite as good about my love with him as Nigel does, but I do feel kind of in love with him, and you feel that he has something to impart, something important to impart.
He's something of a noble savage, in a way. You know, the idea that you know, crazy people, and Dwayne, I mean, he's arguably crazy. I like to qualify it, because in some ways, you know, he's quite
high functioning,
very high functioning. But having something to offer, and as a glimpse into the, you know, the night world, the other side of the moon, you know, that's that's always really attractive.
And there's during the book, there's a channel which is that these guys are making movies all the time. So they're not just lying around at all. They're very busy.
Initially, they're always busy. Though after a certain point, they abandon actual film.
Yes.
For you know, the movie becomes more their life becomes the movie that they're making, which has become this book.
Yes.
Which, you know, I mean, the next stage would be for the book to become a movie.
That's right.
And they'll make a movie about making the book into a movie.
And then people will read the book and lead the life that's...
It's like the mirrors that keep reflecting each other. Yeah.
And they have, during them, they have... you use lines of movie dialogue, sprinkle them throughout the book, and they, in their apartment, they have a wall.
Yeah, the pertinent movie quote wall, where they put quotes from movies that they've seen that have sort of stuck to their ribs, and depending on the relevance, they will either leave them there or paint over them and put new, fresh quotes.
Yeah. And we were talking about great lines from movies when we were talking about this. What are some of the ones that stay up there?
Well, the one I remember from the book, you know, is Peter Lorre, for instance, in M, his first and most famous movie. You know, I can't help myself. You know that, you know, or the one from Badlands where Martin Sheen says, you know, I'll give you $1 if you eat this. It's not a dog. It's
not a rabbit, right? Isn't it?
No, it's what's the lassie kind of dog?
Collie?
Yeah, I'll give you $1 if you eat this collie. Now, there's a line you don't hear every day coming down the street, you know. Or George C. Scott, you owe me money. You know, sometimes it's a simple line like that.
What's that movie? What's that?
That's from The Hustler.
The Hustler. That's right.
The Hustler.
And then at one point he talks just right out of The Godfather. Dwayne does.
Yeah, there are a couple lines from The Godfather, but at one point Nigel insults him. They're angry, and he tells him something like, you know, you should be. Well, I won't quote what Nigel says. It's too. And Dwayne says, what have I done to make you disrespect me so?
An imitation of Brand.
Which is a nice little, you know, it's nice to let the movies do your writing for you, you know, a little bit.
I guess we all do, right?
I think so, yeah.
And are living for us, too, to some extent.
But I sort of sprinkle the movies through the book, and, you know, I think that there's a lot of movie stuff in here that it's amazing how the new generation under 25 has seen very, very few films made before 1980 or even before 1990. It's kind of shocking. I remember meeting a film major once who had graduated from NYU and talking about movies, and he hadn't seen Rebel Without a Cause, On the Waterfront, or The Godfather. Shocking.
Yeah, but I think I tell myself, and I think with some justification, that when I reach my age, part of what I do is regret the ignorance of the young. I mean, when I was young, the older people were always regretting my ignorance, which I strove frantically to repair, but never at a rate sufficient.
I guess one of my hopes is that people who read the book will
go back and
see those great films.
Well, I think I think that is understood. I mean, we're moments away from the Burns Film Center, which shows over and over again old movies, and people come out and see them and are shocked by them. And I make my kids force my kids to watch. John just called from Prague, and I said, and I've got the whole BBC Shakespeare series.
Right, right.
I could hear the transcontinental groan. And I said, no, it's not that. You'll see.
Right, right. Yeah.
But I don't know. Read another passage from the book.
Okay. Let's see. At a certain point, Dwayne and Nigel, in their effort to make it in the business, are invited by an Irish filmmaker to Hollywood to help him shuck his independent film, which is a very, very dark movie.
Which Dwayne loves.
Which Dwayne loves, about 2 Vietnam veterans living, I say, on the fringes of Hoboken and psychosis. And this very, very aggressively uncommercial film is what this Irish filmmaker has gone to Hollywood to shuck to the studios. And so they decide to take a chance and join him out there. But on the way out...
Well, it's not like they're giving anything up, as I recall. Not like they're giving up their
well, that's not very charitable of you, but you're right.
I mean, they've been living...
yeah, with a bathtub on the floor. And
they've been living just below destitution throughout most of the book.
Well, that's true. But anyway, what I'm going to read is they get a drive-away vehicle to get out there for free. And as they're driving out, you know, one of the running mysteries of the book has to do with Dwayne's past. We know that he was involved in the Vietnam War somehow. And Nigel keeps trying to extract for him, what happened? What was your deal in Vietnam? What happened to you? And he always comes back with a story about an exploding dog. He says Vietnam was an exploding dog. Well, here, ask the question again. He comes up with the same answer. And they've stopped in a soda spring in Arizona or New Mexico, one of those bubbling. They found one of these, and they're soaking in this, naked in this bubbling spring. So he again tells the story of the dog. The dog was part Pekingese, part wolfhound, and mostly mongrel, he says, folding a stick of juicy fruit into his mouth and handing me one. It had been lying dead in that dry, dusty street in New Dorn for days, putrefying under the tropical sun. Day after day I'd pass by and the carcass would still be there, still lying in the same place, getting more and more bloated. Don't ask me why, but the natives, they refused to touch it, like it was cursed, like it was the 100-headed dragon of a Hesperides. One day, I'm walking by on my way to a cafe and kaboom! The thing explodes like a booby trap. All the rest of the way down the street, I'm picking maggots out of my face and hair. The water smells of sulfur and is very hot. Steam floats up into my nose, burning my nostrils. It's twilight. The desert sky is the color of an overripe peach, the earth purple below it. That's it, babe. I'm sorry, but that's the best answer I can give you. That was Vietnam. No goddamn fair, I say. You're supposed to tell everything. I followed the rules. I told you everything. Now you do the same, fucker. Fair is fair. Dwayne nods, conceding. Okay, he says. You're right, babe. I'm sorry. Let me try again. He waits a moment or two before beginning. You know those dreams that I keep having? Well, it's always the same dream, really. I'm falling out of a helicopter. In the Army, I was a medic. I rode helicopters all the time. We'd pick up the wounded in them. My job was to patch them up while door gunners strafed the jungle canopy for sappers. Anyway, he lights and drags deeply on a cigarette. One day, me and these 2 other medics, we really did fall out of a helicopter. No shit. They tried to come back for us, but the jungle canopy was too thick and there were too many snipers around. Long story short, babe, soon after me and my fellow medic were taken prisoner by the VC. They brought me and Stevie, that was the other medic's name, to this bamboo hut built over a river. And that's where they tortured us. You were tortured? Do you want me to tell the story or not? Sorry. He clears his throat. They took us one by one from this holding pen underneath the hut, dragged us up through a trap door and sat us down at a table where they made us play Russian roulette. We could hear the snap of the pistol hammer hitting an empty chamber, and then the explosion when it found a bullet, and then we'd see the blood dripping down through the floorboards. I'm thinking, this sounds familiar. When it was our turn, they brought me and Stevie up and took bets on who'd get the first bullet. I'm sitting watching Stevie put the pistol to his head saying, Stevie, you gotta do it. Stevie, if you don't do it, you're gonna die. They're gonna throw you in the pit. Come on, Stevie. Go on. Go ahead, Stevie. Go ahead. Show these bastards, these cocksuckers. Show them. Don't worry, Stevie. Don't worry, kid. Don't worry. Deer hunter. Dwayne goes under, blows bubbles. Yeah. Now, I have to tell you a funny story about reading this passage at a reading. There were a couple of people, myself and a poet named James Reagan, or Reagan, was reading his poetry, but he's also written screenplays. And I read From Life Goes to the Movies, and I read that passage. And then he got up and he said, by the way, I wrote that screenplay.
That's
Isn't
good.
that a coincidence?
That's good.
James Reagan, and he's a wonderful poet.
Now, so it weaves back and forth through between their fantasy life and the culture's fantasy life.
Yeah.
And their real life.
Yeah, and
they're making movies. They're artists. They're making a movie.
Yeah, well, as Nigel says, you know, he really believes that Dwayne is a great artist, or will be as soon as he sees fit to make some great art. You know, it's almost as if the art is usurped by this piece of art that they're making out of their lives, you know, sort of misadventures, you know.
And it's very, I think it's very, there's an agent who one with bulls all over his office and all over his clothing.
Bull Duncan.
Bull Duncan, and he brings them to Florida.
Right.
To a film festival.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the juxtaposition of their lives and the lives of the
people in the film festival, or the characters down there.
And they go to the airport every day to photograph.
Yeah, and you know, some of this really happened, and I've had to do quite a bit of fictionalizing in order to protect the guilty and the innocent. But yeah, they go to await the arriving celebrities, and there are no celebrities. I mean, no one shows up. So
they're hoping to meet Scorsese and De Niro.
But then Brooke Shields does arrive.
Yes, I remember.
She ends up being the star celebrity for the film. She's the only person they can get, basically, and she arrives.
Well, here that raises a whole other interesting question, which is the connection between art and its power, and the people who are involved in it.
Yeah.
And there is no direct correlation. In other words, it may be that touching the robe that Jesus wore will cure boils, but there's no evidence that touching the robe that Brooke Shields wore is going to get you a job writing screenplays.
No. But it might get you money from the tabloids if you take a picture. You know.
But then that's a very messy thing. I remember when they caught Tim Phelps smoking a bong. He just won the Olympics, and they caught him smoking a bong, and he got in all trouble. And someone finally said, if you're partying with Tim Phelps and who's got 8 gold medals, and your first impulse is to take a picture of him with your cell phone and sell it to the tabloids, you're really in trouble. You're really a bad guy. So that whole thing is very dirty.
Yeah.
I mean, when you reach for that handhold, you're.
Well, people want to be. There's something about the movies, especially in this culture, that makes things real. That is more real to people than their own lives.
Well, it should be. I mean, all art should be, or all. This novel, I'm sure, is real. Is more immediate and more dramatic than is the lives that inspired it.
Well, in a way, that's sort of the goal of writing. I think is to create a reality that's not only more real but superior to the reality that we live. That isn't thematically. It's not well written, our reality, our regular reality.
No, it's not. It's full of dull, meaningless passages. Or passages in which we are unable to discern the meaning.
And when we create art, we create heroes. And
villains.
And villains, but you can't have heroes without villains. And the idea that life, that you can be a hero, or that anyone can be a hero. And you were talking about that when we spoke earlier, even with biographies. Good biographies are always about a hero.
Yeah, if the person is not a hero, or else a terrible villain,
Yeah.
then there's no, and mostly people don't write that kind of biography.
Yeah.
Then there's no book.
Right.
I mean, you can produce a book, you can even sell a book,
Yeah.
but it will have no vitality
Yeah.
in it. But we are all, to quote Dickens, the heroes of our own lives.
Yeah. I think the impetus for me writing this book, which, I mean, I don't think I'll ever write anything this autobiographical again, was to sort of, you know, elevate and celebrate a friendship and put it on the level of, you know, of heroes, you know.
And to understand it, too.
And to understand
Yes.
it, yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of it. I mean, for me, that's part of what makes the process exciting, is that if there is a Ouija board element to it, you are, if you're writing well, accessing parts of your consciousness that ordinarily you don't allow up there in the upper cranium, right?
Yeah.
So you come to a fuller understanding of what's happened
Yeah.
than you had originally.
Yeah, and you give shape to something, you know, and that's, I find that the most satisfying thing about writing, is that, I mean, I have a sort of order for mania. I don't really care about certain things. I don't care about having to have tailored suits. I don't care about driving a, you know, a Lexus or a fancy car. But the idea of having something artistic that's complete, it has its shape, it's bound, you know, then somehow it seems to redeem the sloppiness of life. You know, the hazardous, chaotic, messy, you know, and in a way, you know, when you do write a book celebrating part of your life or using that material, it's as if, for me, that your life is, if it wasn't wasted before, it's doubly not wasted. It's, I don't know,
It's redeemed.
It's redeemed, yeah. And
it's odd, because I think that, I wonder if this is true of everyone. In my own life, I'm far too sloppy.
Right.
And in my writing, I'm probably way too neat. I mean, the first impulse of the beginning writer is always to be orderly in such a way as to completely exclude life
Any
itself.
creativity.
Any creativity.
Yeah.
To get the form before you get the content.
Well, tell that to some of my writing students. You know, they can be pretty sloppy. I shouldn't say that. Some of them are very.
Well, you can be sloppy and without having any content too.
I know that. I remember reading about Nelson Algren. You know, his apartment or wherever he was living would be a complete disaster, total mess, except this desk, which would be very neat, everything orderly and organized, and that sort of speaks of the, you know, of art. You know, it's like you have this place where
there's one place.
This one place where things are, where chaos doesn't rule. You've taken control of something.
Simon Schama, I wonder if I dare say this, who's I think quite a brilliant writer. I saw his office, and it was really a terrible mess.
Oh, really?
And it was a great comfort to me, but I'm afraid it's, you know, I've imitated him by having, without writing with his beauty and style, I've managed to develop quite the sloppy office. I guess you imitate the parts that's easier.
Well, but your prose is, I won't say neat, but it's very elegant, and, you know, every word is carefully chosen and not wasted, and, you know, and that, you know, that's important.
Well, thank you. I don't think I was fishing for a compliment. Read one more. Right, we'll read one more passage of this.
Okay.
Wonderful.
They do get to Hollywood, and I'll read this last passage here. It's my little description of them trying to go around selling this movie, which is called Night Vision. And they can't, because they can't secure a proper rental van, they rent a late model hearse, Cadillac, 1968 Cadillac hearse, to take the film around to the studios, which is obviously symbolic of this movie that's kind of dead on arrival. So I'll read you a scene where they're in one of the lots.
Okay.
And they get there. Dwayne rolls the hearse into the Mercedes sculpture garden that is the visitor's parking lot. As Archie waits in the car, Dwayne and I lug the heavy cans through the gray sheets of rain. It's been raining the whole time there in Hollywood. Toward the screening trailer, where a sign beneath a blue burning red light above a blue door says, "Screening in progress." We wait, soaking, for the light to go off. When it does, we knock. A scowling man in pork pie hat and pale trench coat, the co-equal of Richard Widmark in Kiss of Death, answers. "We're moguls," Dwayne tells him. "Hand over the cans, babe." Film canisters in hand, Madigan recedes into the dark depths of the screening trailer. The red light goes back on. So they get back in the hearse. Dwayne rolls the hearse onto the studio backlot, where giant fans whip raindrops into a storm at sea for what appears to be yet another remake of Mutiny on the Bounty, with masts snapping like twigs and as mutinous stuntmen plunge to their air-cushioned deaths. We drive on, passing a Wells Fargo stagecoach, a wooden submarine, King Kong's left foot, and the upper two-thirds of the Eiffel Tower. We roll past plaster brownstones on a fake New York street. "Dumbass Californians," Dwayne says, shaking his head. "They even got the Johnny pumps wrong. They're black with silver tops, not green. Everyone knows that. What the fuck is wrong with these fucking people?" Anyway.
That's great. I don't know what a Johnny pump is.
It's a fire hydrant.
That's a fire hydrant.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember, yeah, they always get those things wrong.
Yeah.
Those fake New York streets, you know, in California they paint the curbs red.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that always bothers me about television and movies is that they've got everything so tidy. Even a person, even a heroin addict, minutes from death, has a tidier bedroom than I do usually. I mean, somebody's been in there, you know, laying out the half-smoked cigarettes in with a kind of symmetry that.
Well, when you see period piece movies set in the 40s or 50s, first of all, everything's 10 years older than it should be, and everything, you know, everything looks like it was bought in a flea market, and it has that imprimatur of antique. You know,
you can practically see the masking tape with a price tag on it.
Yeah, But in California the curbs are red, and so on the New York street on the back lot the curbs are red.
Of course.
You know.
Anyway, it's a wonderful novel, and we've run out of time. But thanks so much for coming. And
my pleasure.
And it's a beautiful book, and people should go to the Pleasantville Village bookstore and order it immediately in many copies.
Good. Thanks, Ben.